good evening, this is Houndog Steve coming to you on the 31st of December. Yes, it is New Year's Eve. We're on the last evening of the year. Right now, where I am, it is freezing rain outside, which is going to turn to wet snow, back to freezing rain, and then in the early hours of the morning, it will be raining. And so I've decided I'm just going to stay home. I am going to have a glass of wine and wish all of you a very happy and successful New Year. I'd like to thank all of my new subscribers. We are now past the 6,000 mark and moving onward and upward. Thank you very much. It's great to have you with us. Great to see you part of the conversation, and please do leave a comment below if you feel so inclined. Anyway, I thought I'd go through my 2019 predictions, my top 10 predictions for the year. And so I'm going to start at number 10. And number 10, I am predicting that the political correctness battle will continue. But it is going to become muted as we go through the year, because I think you're going to see that other issues, and those issues are going to take up people's attention, especially around cost of living, putting food on the table, so on and so forth. And another reason that people are going to lose interest in this whole meme is some of the nonsense that came out over Christmas even. The banning of the song Baby It's Cold Outside, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, because it was bullying, and calling snowmen snow people. During the year, Justin Trudeau chastised some woman for saying mankind and say, oh no, we say people kind now. There are a lot bigger fish to fry than those little things, and what you do when you fight over those petty little changes, you cheapen the whole movement. So PC, it's still going to be there, but I think you're going to see a lot less attention is going to be paid to it. But the biggest reason I think that PC, and especially the feminist movement, will start to die down is stuff like this. Linda Sarsour saying, about anti-Semitism. And of course, what about Women's March cancelled because there's too many white women? What, are you kidding me? Come on. This is insane. Okay, number 9. Creators on YouTube, after experiencing deplatforming, demonetization, the crazy terms of service that some of these Silicon Valley companies have that they don't even adhere to. First of all, we saw Alex Jones completely being deplatformed, from YouTube, PayPal. He couldn't get any of his donations. Now, I will grant you that Alex Jones is kind of out there, but there was another person got deplatformed on Patreon, and this is Sargon of Akkad, or Carl Benjamin, and he is such a soft-spoken, moderate, thoughtful, but a centrist, there's no doubt about that, and so he's seen, of course, as a completely, over-the-edge right-winger. Anyway, he got deplatformed on Patreon for something that he said in an interview that was not even on Patreon. He was being interviewed on another website by a group of white supremacists, and he likened them to Nazis, and there you go. He got deplatformed on Patreon. Well, lots and lots of people have left Patreon. The supporters have left Patreon because of that. Jordan Peterson and Jeff Rubin are now working on a independent platform, and I think that will be a raging success, because we can all see now what a bunch of malicious thugs these collectivists, these Silicon Valley tech giants are. And it's interesting because you can see how they all start to gang up on you. On an interview with Patreon, which was made public, Patreon said that if you want to use PayPal, you have to abide by PayPal's terms of service on Patreon. So you have PayPal, you have all of these platforms for videoing, Patreon, and then of course Subscribestar came up, and then all of a sudden PayPal wouldn't do business with them. Then Google stopped bringing you up in searches. YouTube deplatforms you. I mean, these people just all of a sudden, Twitter, deplatforms you. You know, they all are working together, lockstep with each other, and this is like a dictatorship. This is like being in Russia. You know, you call what we're living in a democracy. That's not a democracy. When you can be literally cut off from your lifeline, where you cannot earn an income, where you cannot exchange money, this is absolutely outrageous. You know, there are people who are doing hard work on some of these channels to earn a living, and they're doing a great job at it. So to have terms of service that these companies themselves don't live up to, and again, in the Patreon interview, it's quite clearly stated that at the end of the day, it is a personal decision. Okay, they can override the terms of service if they so feel that the video warrants it. And so what's the point of having terms of service if you're not going to stick to them? Anyway, like I say, I think this is going to spur people on to create, to get together, to create a Bill of Rights for the internet, which I think is becoming long overdue, and new platforms will spring up. VPNs are already being used by people. There are companies that you can buy a VPN, virtually protected network, so it protects your searches, your browsing online, so that nobody can pry. I think we're all of a sudden becoming a lot more aware of what privacy actually means and what data mining can do for a corporate's profits. Okay, prediction number 8. The mainstream media will continue to fail. It will do so because of small-mindedness, a parochial attitude, and a lack of real content. I mean, right now, CNN, you might as well call it TNN, the Trump News Network. And all of these alphabet media outlets, you know, NBC, ABC, MSNBC, all they talk about is Trump. Anything to do with Trump. And they are, oh, he's got small hands. Oh, he takes 2 scoops of ice cream. Oh, he was signing MAGA hats in a... Come on, get over it. Okay, there's more news. The troops are being pulled out of Syria. The Yellow Vest protests are going on in Europe, and you're not reporting any of this. Brexit, you don't see any of this stuff on the news anymore. It's all Trump or Trump related, and people are hungry for news, and so they're being driven onto the internet. And of course, now with the advent of these Android boxes where you can get YouTube up on your big screen TV in the living room, oh my God, you know, now you can watch YouTube in comfort. So you're going to see a lot more people surfing these channels and getting their news and information, as I do, from a multiple of sources. Okay, so you get some kind of balanced reporting. So I think mainstream media is just going to fall so far into the background because it costs a fortune. You know, these big companies, I mean, they pay millions and millions of dollars in salaries to sit here and do essentially what I'm doing in my office, you know, for what, like, I don't know, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6 a video? Come on. How can you compete with that? And of course, what you get with someone like me is that I'm not being paid by some big corporation, so I don't have any particular loyalties, and nor do any of the YouTube creators. Okay, so yeah, there's some crazies out there. But there's some crazies everywhere. You know, if you go into a store and you start reading News of the World or National Enquirer or something like that, you know, we all know that Clinton's going to have a 3rd alien baby, and you know, there's monsters from Mars coming, and the Earth is flat, and all this kind of stuff. You know, but you're not surprised, right? Because it's the National Enquirer. So there you go, and that's what you got to do online when you're searching news. And you'll see, just go to channels a few times, and you'll be able to tell whether the person delivering the information is sincere or not. Number 7, robotics will continue to progress at an incredible pace. I don't know if you've been to the Boston Dynamics website, or have gone on to search for Boston Dynamics on YouTube. Just type in Boston Dynamics robots, and I think that you will be absolutely staggered when you see the capabilities of these new generation robots. And when you see these things running across open ground, jumping over logs, leaping, doing 3-foot, one-legged leaps from one side to the other, you can just see that there is an army of these things coming along, and they will all have some kind of autonomous sentry program on them, so they will be deciding who and what is the enemy. And if you want to see a cautionary tale, go onto Netflix, watch Black Mirror, go to Black Mirror season 3 and Metalhead. Just watch that episode of Metalhead. It's about an hour long. Absolutely brilliant story, and it is going to scare the pants right off you. And of course we're now getting into 3D printing of parts, so I can just see this thing is going to just become more sophisticated as we find more and more ways for robotics and AI to become integrated in our lives. And of course, you know, you can see that there are many good things that could come out of this. You know, there are many dangerous, horrible, dirty, cleaning sewers, going down into the most dangerous mines in the world, you know, drilling to the center of the earth to shake hands with the devil, you know, waiting for the roof to cave in so they can play that folk song about you. You know, we could send completely automated robots down there to do that kind of work. Now, there is one proviso with all of this, although I am pretty much, you know, I can see the benefit of AI, but we have to deal with the human element, and that is, you know, in this transitional period, you just can't throw people overboard. People have worked all their lives and suddenly find themselves, you know, caught in a technology trap that they can't traverse. And so that has to go hand in hand, and there's some responsibility. You know, if you're going to bring AI into the picture and robotics, there's some responsibility that these corporations have to mitigate the fallout. And also that we need to have a say. You know, as I said, I don't see any problem with putting a robot in a highly radioactive area, going to some, you know, in some sewage treatment plant. I have no problem with that. But you know, just to do AI and robotics just because we can, well, I think we need to be part of that conversation, and I don't want to see people rubbed out of the conversation. But I think we're going to be getting some shock and awe in 2019, because they've got the foundations there now. And when you put together, there's 3 things. There is Boston Dynamics, and when you see their robots, you'll see that they are a much more robust kind of robot. But go on to Honda robots and check out some of those robots, and they are far more sophisticated. And then go check out Disney robots. Some of the robotics that they use in Disney World, absolutely incredible. These are, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart from a real person. So you put those 3 things together, and you've got the Terminator. You have the Terminator. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Okay, prediction number 6. I think that we're going to get more revelations from the Me Too meme. I think there's going to be more revelations coming forward about human trafficking. I think the cat is out of the bag on that one, and there seems to be a lot more action taking place not just in North America but internationally. And we're now starting to hear some of the absolute horror stories of some of the abuses that have taken place over the years. But in general, I think the Me Too hashtag is going to morph, because we've had some examples now where the rule of law is being brought back into play. We had the Kavanaugh hearings this year, and they were absolutely incredible. How anybody can come forward with no evidence whatsoever other than a memory is unbelievable. And it's an unbelievable step in the wrong direction, as far as I'm concerned, from our legal justice system. And of course, we had this wonderful example of Michael Avenatti. This is the lawyer who defended or brought against the motion against Donald Trump on behalf of Stormy, or is that Steamy Daniels, the stripper, okay, saying that he'd had sex with her. And well, wouldn't you just know it, he gets caught up in a scandal where he has allegedly assaulted his partner, girlfriend, who apparently had marks on her face and so on and so forth. And now it's gone from, oh, believe the victim, to, hey, I will be exonerated when the facts come out. So he's calling for the burden of proof, the rule of law. And this is so foundational, and I think this is really going to come back into play. I think people are going to regain their common sense about this, and why we have laboured long and hard to have a rule of law. And what needs to happen more than anything is that rule of law is applied to everybody across the board. Doesn't matter whether it's a politician, a corporation, head of a corporation, or a regular working Joe. The law should be equal for all. Okay, prediction number 5. I'm predicting a hard Brexit in March of 2019. Both sides are absolutely intractable. The EU does not want to negotiate, and Britain has drawn the line in the sand and said, well, this is as far as we're going to negotiate. It is not a great deal, and of course Theresa May is facing significant opposition at home from her own party, and she's already said that she will not remain as Prime Minister going into the next election. She's going to oversee Brexit and the extraction of Britain from Europe, but that will be it, and she will leave time for a new leadership race to take place and to move onward into the next election from there. And so this, I believe, is what Europe is scared to death of. But again, you see, I remember seeing, I'm just going to give you a little example here. I remember seeing a video, years and years and years ago, and I believe it was in Indonesia, and it was how they catch these little capuchin monkeys. And what they would do is they would get a coconut shell, they would hollow it out, cut the end off, and tie it to a tree by a piece of string, and they would put a piece of some rice in there. Okay, now the hole in the end was big enough for the monkey to get its hand in like this, but once it gripped the rice and formed a fist, it could not get its hand out of the coconut shell. And it would sit there and wait for someone to grab hold of it and capture it, because it was too greedy to let go of the rice. And that's all it had to do: let go of the rice, pull your hand out and run away, and you're free. Okay, so the same thing is going on here with Europe. Instead of being easy to get along with, and they really need to have equitable negotiations here, because Italy is watching, Austria is watching, Poland is watching, Hungary is watching, Spain is watching, Portugal is watching, and France and the Gilets jaunes protesters are also watching. And you know, this is how the negotiations will go for each of these countries, and if they're going to make it arduous, it will make them even more determined, I believe, to dig their heels in and say no to the EU and go after their own exit strategies. Just out of distaste, because if this is the way you deal with people, you're exposing yourself, you're exposing your attitude, and you're exposing your nature. So the reason I believe that Europe is so frightened that Britain will have a hard exit is that they will leave with an unsigned contract, so no dealing and wheeling can take place, and so Britain will be forced to import from foreign countries the goods and foods and things that it needs, equipment, machinery, and so on and so forth, resources to manufacture, to build whatever it is they want to do in their manufacturing plants. And they're going to find out, and they're going to demonstrate again to the rest of the world that you can pick up the phone and say, Pennsylvania, you got some coal for sale? How much? Okay, that's good. Ship it. We'll send you the check. Because in the real world, at the end of the day, a seller is always looking for a buyer, and a buyer is always looking for a seller. And under those conditions, wheeling and dealing will prevail. And as long as you have the money to pay, and Britain will be saving a good chunk of change. What I didn't realise this, but they are the second largest contributor after Germany as far as financial input. And we get whipped at the post. We've lost our fishing grounds, everything. It's unbelievable, the things, all of our sovereignty. And again, this is a warning and example to North America. This is what is coming this direction. And you do not want to be ruled by a bureaucracy. You can see what's happening over there. There's no heart, there's no feeling, there's no care and concern. The bureaucracy only functions to keep the corporation and its own organizational groups functioning. That's it. And yes, they do deliver some services to the public, but by and large, like I say, one example is where I live, City of Quarther Lakes. 72% of the budget goes to pay people to push pieces of paper around to get the job done. We never had that before in these townships and municipalities. You know, you had 5 council members, 4 guys on the crew, a roadworks foreman, a clerk of the council, and a secretary. That was it. Maybe 10 people. So there you go. Hard Brexit in March. Look out for that one. And there'll be some whooping and wailing and goodness knows what else taking place when that happens. 4 scientific breakthroughs will be nothing short of incredible. I'm talking now specifically in the medical field. And I just saw a video and listened to an interview just a couple of days ago where they had removed a lung from a pig, built a lattice work, and used that to hang the cells of the lung on. They grew this in a growth tank. They put the lung back inside the pig and it became a lung. Now, they haven't got to the point where it's actually exchanging air, where they could take out the other lung and have the pig survive completely on the transplanted lung. But it grew into a perfectly functioning lung. It formed its own life support so that it could function. And they are thinking, because what happens is that when they do the operation, of course, they have to kill the pig to do an autopsy to see how the lung was forming. And so they've got to a 3-month. That was the 3-month stage. And they're saying we don't know what we're going to find when we get to the 6-month stage. So I think we are going to see some jaw-dropping breakthroughs in 2019. Now, I am not going to get involved in the moral argument of this, but from a scientific and from, wow, isn't that interesting? Oh my God, I didn't believe you could actually do that kind of stuff. It's going to be an interesting year. We are moving ahead with leaps and bounds, now using cells in 3D printing and using 3D printers to build the lattice work for an ear or a nose to hang these cells on, and these cells grow into the organ that the lattice work. Okay, and the interesting thing about this was that there was no rejection, because you're using your own cells to grow these new body parts. There is no rejection from your body, because this has been the biggest issue in most of these things. So you could see whole heart transplants, and it's actually your heart regrown and reinserted back into your body. No rejection, no fuss, no muss. That's unbelievable. And that is the era we are moving into, ladies and gentlemen. I am fascinated. I am just fascinated where this path is going to lead us, and a little scared too. There's no doubt about it. There will be some trepidation along this path, and there will be some incredible moral hazards to breach as we move forward in this area. Okay, prediction number 3. Climate change. Climate change is, I think, well, these top 3 stories could be interchangeable. okay, because climate change is going to insert itself in our lives in ways which we can't even fathom yet. And the thing that is frustrating me about all of this is that we are focusing all of our efforts on CO2. CO2 is 0.47% of our atmosphere. It is it's a trace of a trace gas. It's an important gas, there's no doubt about it, because all living things on this planet need CO2. But there is definitive proof from the Greenland ice core samples and the Vostok ice core samples, which have basically all been analysed now, and it has been proven that CO2 is a trailing indicator, not a leading indicator. Okay, and of course these Vostok ice core samples prove beyond any reasonable doubt that climate change is absolutely real and present. Our climate is changing all the time, and so we're moving from an ice age. Okay, about 12,000 years ago, the last ice age ended. We have been in an interglacial period for about 12,000 years, and we're getting to the end of that. This is the peak. This is the up and down top of that peak, where we're in a perfect situation to have seasonal change and moderate weather. Okay, so now we're going back into some very inclement weather, and focusing on CO2. I think CO2 will get lost in the dust or the mud or the ice or the snow as we try and tackle the effects of climate change, the flooding, the baking, the inclement weather, the out of season frost, not being able to predict from year to year what your seasons are going to be. That's why people were nomadic, couldn't predict the seasons. So they just had to go backwards and forwards with the season to the summer hunting grounds and the winter hibernation grounds, basically feast or famine, hunter-gatherer type of lifestyle. I think what's going to become, more clear, because the weather changes are going to become so apparent, is that there are many factors in this. And CO2 is the last of them. We have ocean currents. Huge. The Gulf Stream has slowed by 50% since 1995. That's huge. You don't think that has an effect on the weather? You betcha it does. Okay, the Gulf Stream is the great moderator, and I don't want to get into too many details here, but it is a thermodynamic system, and these are convection currents traveling around, and eventually these systems mix. And as they mix, and of course we have been warming, so we've been melting glacial water, which is fresh. It doesn't have the same kind of density that salt water does, so the Gulf Stream has been slowing. We have had slowing down of sun flaring. This has increased the cosmic rays. Cosmic rays tend to create cloud cover, and dense cloud cover at that, and so we've increased our albedo effect. And if you increase your albedo effect by just 20%, from 65% to 85%, you've gone from a summer's day to an ice age. Okay, so we're going to realize there are many factors, and I think it's probably one of those things that's going to bring us together more than any single thing that I can think of. You see those floods at the Red River, and all of a sudden you have people from every background, every race, every religion working shoulder to shoulder to fill sandbags and build sandbag walls to keep the water back, and all of a sudden you formed a community. Well, we're going to be doing that. We're going to have communal gardens, I believe, and everyone is going to be doing something in their backyard to supplement, but you are going to depend on your neighbor to get through this. We all are. It is going to be tenuous, and I think we're going to start to see those real solid changes that make you realize that this is not just an odd rainstorm here and there. This is going to be serious stuff going down. Okay, so here we go, getting down there. Prediction number 2. This will be the world economy is so swaddled in debt. I did a video the other day. It is going to consume the whole banking industry. Well, it already has consumed the whole banking industry, and this is really a case where you have a dead horse and you're just putting electric shock through it, and it might be jumping, but it is not functioning properly. A lot of this stuff has been held together by fast and easy money, the ability to roll over debt into an asset and then asset back into debt again. And one of the things I was thinking today, I'm kind of wondering, because everybody's into hedging now, hedging their bets. And so, let's say for example, you're a big investor, you've got big money in there, and the hedge fund looks at that and says, hey, if this guy wins, we could lose big time. Okay, we better buy a bet going against this guy just in case we go down. So I'm wondering how many hedge fund companies, how many banks, how many central banks are actually holding both sides of the debt. And it's going to be this massive knockout punch where they just cancel each other out and end up with no money because they don't have any assets to be able to create any more money, and everyone is just so far in debt that they don't qualify. And bizarre as it may sound, you may just see something as crazy as that happen. I've heard of debt Jubilee. I think that the debts are so entwined now. When debt Jubilee used to take place, debts were all whole. Somebody bought something of somebody else, they took on a debt, they didn't divide that debt up and resell it to somebody else to make some profit. No. That was a whole debt, and it was easy to resolve. I don't think these debts are so easy to resolve. And I think why this is that we have got into what I call Eaton syndrome. I don't know if you remember the Eaton's company. It was founded by Timothy Eaton, and of course he knew all about the business because he started from scratch. Okay, and as you go through the children, once you get up to George Eaton, who was the last Eaton, that was the head of Eaton's, it fell apart. He didn't know what he was doing. He handed off to management, and he couldn't see when things were going wrong because he didn't have a thorough understanding of the business. He was just so far away from Timothy Eaton. Okay, and I think that this is what's going on in the big money families, is that you're now into the third, fourth or fifth generation away from these founding big families like the Rockefellers, like the Rothschilds, and so on and so forth. Okay, well, these younger generations, they think these systems can just go on forever without any tending. Well, no. And of course, with the computer and algorithms and so on and so forth, they've come up with fancy new ways to make it look as if you can levitate with no visible means of support and no anti-grav unit to keep you up there. You just levitate. Well, you don't just levitate, and debts have to be resolved, and I think there is going to be a comeuppance in 2019, and there will be no bailout from the government or the people, and I don't think the people will have enough money in the bank to bail out the banks either. And this is when cryptocurrencies will flourish. So hang on to those Bitcoins, those Ethereums, and those Litecoins, okay, because when this stalls, we are moving so quickly that commerce has to take place now, and all you need for commerce to take place is a means of settlement, a trusted means of settlement. And that's what Bitcoin and these other two cryptocurrencies, Ethereum and Litecoin, are. They are a trustworthy means of settlement where you can establish trust without actually seeing the other party. And so we will leap into these things, and the central banks will be in no position to try and control them or to regulate them, because they will be just too busy trying to clean up their own mess and lick their own wounds as they walk away running from people because they have destroyed people's lives. This is why they came up with a Jubilee Day, was because the first time they did this, or maybe the first few times they ran through this and they didn't have a Jubilee Day, that was when bankers started being hung from lampposts, and that's why they cancel all debts before that takes place. Okay, they recognize that this is a zero-sum game, and everybody ends up a loser except the banks. And if that's the case, the banks end up being the losers because the public turn against them. So this leads us to my number one prediction, and it is connected, and many of these things are connected, and this is the yellow vest protests in France spreading now throughout the world, and they are going to continue on, and they are going to get more and more violent as the government uses violence to counteract and to try and suppress that which is already abundantly clear to the people who have to live this life and spend real money on real inflated products that they just can't make ends meet, and there's no way they can make ends meet, and an awful lot of them are slipping into bankruptcy. Okay, so the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest protests, and of course this is connected to central banking, to inflation, to farmers and food and the climate, okay, because this means food costs are going to increase. So these are all little sticks of fuel on the fire to keep these protests going. And unfortunately for the elite leaders of this world, they are not going to try and fix the underlying problems, because for them there are no underlying problems. Okay, we are experiencing the underlying problems, and until those are dealt with, and dealt with equitably this time, not some, fast off you go handshake, But I don't think the elitists know how to be equitable. Look how they deal with each other, for goodness sake. So this is going to fuel these protests. They are going to expand, and they will touch every country in the world. And you know why? Because we all have one of these things. Okay? We are now interconnected, and yes, they can track us, they can follow us, they can listen to us, but we're also interconnected. So let them take note of that, and let them eat carbon, huh, Mr. Macron? Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed these 10 predictions of mine, and we will be following them in the new year to see how they play out. And they're really a continuation of the things that began to percolate, during the last 2-3 years. And we had the Arab Spring, we've had Occupy Wall Street, we've had little indications that all is not well in Lotus Land. And I think these are going to continue to come out, and I think this is a good thing. By the way, it may sound like it's all doom and gloom, but actually, until you address real issues in a real way, you can't solve them. The alcoholic cannot stop being an alcoholic until they have first admitted to themselves that that's what the problem is. Then they will walk through the doors of AA willingly, because they've acknowledged that they have a problem and they can't solve it on their own. And I think this is the same sort of existential crisis that every civilization faces. And we either cross this hurdle or we don't. And the hurdle is that at some point in every civilization's history there comes a time when you have to stop doing all the things that got you to here and embrace a new way of doing business. Okay, the internet has arrived, and unless we have some kind of sun flare or some kind of extreme event, it's going to stick around, and it's going to allow us to cooperate and to do commerce with each other in ways which we have never been able to do before, and without the corporations, who are probably the most inefficient people and way to do business on this planet. I would much rather see a situation where, for example, if I want to buy a unique set of carved items, that I can go to any country in the world on the internet to somebody who has created those carved items, and that we can agree on a price and a deal, and they can be shipped from that location to mine. And of course vice versa, that person might want something from out of my garage, or my skills or talents or what have you. And so it's not what I call the New World Order. I like to think of it of a people's thing, and it will be the New World Community. And so that is what I'm looking forward to seeing the beginnings of. And I think we already are seeing the beginnings of, because we are starting to network in incredible ways on the internet. And it's absolutely fabulous that we are starting to think outside of the box and resolve some of the problems in our area. And I think that's basically all you can do. You can try and resolve situations in other parts of the world and other parts of the country, but you will never know exactly what those conditions are. You only know your own local environment. So if you can't do anything on a larger scale, do something on a smaller scale. Do something local. Make the place you are a little better because of your presence. And on that happy note, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off. Please, if you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe below. Thanks again to all of my new subscribers and all of my existing subscribers for joining me on this journey and contributing to the narrative. So please leave your comment, and happy New Year. Cheers. You stay safe, and we'll talk to you real soon. You take care now. Bye.